On July 15, 2026, Vice President JD Vance sat down with Joe Rogan and said something unambiguous. We are not going to send 150,000 ground troops in order to accomplish a change in a regime. We are not in that business anymore. We are just not. That same week, the President of the United States convened a meeting in the White House Situation Room. The subject of that meeting, according to the Wall Street Journal, was the potential seizure of Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export hub, using United States ground troops. Two statements. One administration. 1 week, they do not say the same thing. The Wall Street Journal was the first to report it. On the evening of July 15th, the same day Vance appeared on Rogan's podcast, Trump hosted a formal Situation Room meeting with senior national security officials. The agenda, according to multiple U.S. officials who spoke to the Journal, included 2 items. First, the potential seizure of Kharg Island and other Iranian territory along the Strait of Hormuz using U.S. ground forces. Second, the potential bombing of a tunnel complex at a location known as Pickaxe Mountain, a nuclear-linked site the United States had not yet targeted in 9 consecutive nights of strikes. Kharg Island is not a minor tactical objective. It handles roughly 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. It is Iran's economic lifeline. Seizing it would not be a limited operation. It would be an act of territorial occupation of Iranian soil, the first time American ground forces would hold Iranian territory in the history of the 2 countries' conflict. The meeting was described as one of multiple formal and informal conversations Trump had held in recent days with senior officials about expanding the war. It was not a hypothetical discussion. It was a planning session. Trump did not hide his thinking. On Fox News that same week, he said directly, "Sometimes you need a ground campaign. But we have other people that will do the ground campaign for us." When asked specifically whether U.S. forces would seize Kharg Island, he said it was unlikely, but he did not rule it out. He had said something similar weeks earlier at the NATO summit. "I give them a little warning." On Truth Social, Trump had reshared a statement he originally made in the 1980s, that he would seize Kharg Island if Iran targeted U.S. troops. Those troops had now been targeted. 2 were killed in Jordan on July 17th. 1 died in Iraq on July 18. The statement from the 1980s was back in circulation. Trump had put it there himself. When pressed directly by reporters on whether he would order a ground invasion, Trump said, "I would, if we degrade them enough." Those 5 words. That is not a denial. Vice President JD Vance's appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience ran nearly 3 hours. On the question of ground troops, he was precise. "We are not going to send 150,000 ground troops in order to accomplish a change in a regime. Unless the people on the ground themselves want to accomplish that outcome, we are not going to send troops in regardless." He went further on a separate occasion, telling reporters that the United States has no interest in a protracted conflict with Iran. He described the mission as surgical and targeted. He said the administration's goal was Iran's nuclear program, not its territory. Bombing alone was not enough, he added. Diplomacy was also necessary. Vance also acknowledged something that received less attention. He told Rogan that he had been less enthusiastic about striking Iran than Trump. That admission, made publicly by the sitting vice president about the president's decision to go to war, is not a routine statement. It is a rare instance of visible distance between the 2 men on the most consequential decision of this administration. The gap between Trump's Situation Room and Vance's podcast is not a communications problem. It is a policy problem, and the record contains both sides of it. Kharg Island sits in the northeastern Persian Gulf, roughly 25 kilometers off Iran's southwestern coast. It is small, approximately 14 square kilometers. It has been Iran's primary oil export terminal since the 1960s. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, it was attacked repeatedly by Iraqi forces. It survived. It kept exporting oil. It is not undefended, CNN reported, citing U.S. intelligence sources, that Iran had been actively building up its defenses on Kharg Island in anticipation of a possible U.S. ground operation. Iranian forces had been moving additional military personnel and air defense systems to the island. They had been laying traps. The buildup was not accidental. Tehran had read the same Wall Street Journal reports that everyone else had. Read. The International Institute for Strategic Studies estimates that Iran fields approximately 570,000 active duty troops and 350,000 reservists, backed by coastal missile batteries, naval mines, and swarms of fast attack boats. These are not the forces of a country preparing to surrender a strategically vital island without a fight. Retired Marine General Frank McKenzie who ran U.S. military operations across the Middle East from 2019 to 2022, appeared on CBS Face the Nation and publicly advocated for taking Kharg. That is something we should think about doing, he said, because possession of Iranian soil would be a significant factor in future negotiations with Iran. That argument is being made publicly by former senior commanders. It is being discussed privately in the Situation Room, and it is being publicly contradicted by the Vice President of the United States. There is a third element to this story that does not appear in Trump's Truth Social posts or Vance's podcast appearances. It appeared in the Washington Post and in a warning from a senior U.S. official who agreed to speak only on condition of anonymity. The official's statement was direct. We do not have enough to safely sustain operations. And I don't think the White House is aware of that. 9 consecutive nights of airstrikes had consumed an enormous volume of American precision munitions, according to analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies. In the 39 days of conflict between the start of the war in February and the ceasefire in April, the United States hit more than 13,000 targets using primarily 7 weapon systems: Tomahawk cruise missiles, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff missiles, Precision Strike missiles, Standard Missile 6, THAAD interceptors, and Patriots. For at least 4 of those munitions, Washington had likely expended more than half of its available stockpiles during the first phase of the war alone. The ceasefire in April had provided a pause. The resumption of strikes in July was burning through what remained. The Pentagon's emergency budget request told its own story. 850 THAAD interceptors and 780 Tomahawk cruise missiles requested for fiscal year 2027, compared to 55 of each in the prior year. A 188% increase in overall missile procurement funding. That production will not arrive in time to affect the current conflict. Iran's strategy became visible in that gap. A Shahed drone costs approximately $30,000 to produce. The interceptor missile that shoots it down costs millions. Iran can absorb losing drones. The United States cannot indefinitely absorb losing interceptors at the current rate of exchange. When White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt was asked about the shortage, she said the United States has more than enough capability and cited weapon stockpiles in places that many people in this world do not even know about. The U.S. official who spoke to the Washington Post gave a different assessment. We do not have enough to safely sustain operations. 2 statements. 1 government. 1 week. Operation Epic Fury launched in February, with stated objectives: destroy Iran's nuclear program, end its missile capability, stop its support for regional proxy forces, and open the Strait of Hormuz. 5 months later, the Strait of Hormuz remained effectively closed to normal commercial shipping. Iran's nuclear stockpile was reported to be sealed underground. Iran's government was still in place, and American service members were still dying in Jordan and Iraq. The bombing campaign had hit more than 13,000 targets, 9 consecutive nights of renewed strikes. Iran had responded with ballistic missiles and drones across 6 countries: Kuwait, Jordan, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Iraq. Neither side had signaled willingness to return to negotiations. The Memorandum of Understanding signed in June had collapsed. Both sides blamed the other. Ali Vaez, Iran project director at the International Crisis Group, offered what may be the most precise summary of the situation available. It took about 2 months to negotiate a page and a half of the Memorandum of Understanding. It took only 3 weeks for it to unravel. If such a minimal understanding cannot hold between the 2 sides, there is no way you can put a floor under these tensions, which means that we are going to go from one cycle of violence into the next. He called it a forever war. That phrase is now in the public record. Return to the core of what this week revealed. Trump convened a Situation Room meeting to discuss seizing Iranian territory with ground forces. Vance told the world's most listened to podcast that sending ground troops was not something the United States was going to do. Trump told Fox News he would order a ground invasion if Iran was degraded enough. The Washington Post reported that the United States does not have enough munitions to safely sustain the air campaign. Karoline Leavitt said the United States has more than enough capability and secret stockpiles. Each of those statements is in the public record. Each was made by a senior official of the United States government within the same week. These facts do not resolve each other. They exist simultaneously in the same week, under the same administration, in the same war. As of July 21, 2026, 17 United States service members have been confirmed killed in the war that began on February 28. More than 400 have been wounded. A senior U.S. official has warned that munitions stockpiles cannot safely sustain current operations. The president has not ruled out a ground invasion. The vice president has ruled it out. A situation room meeting discussed it as a specific option with a specific target. Kharg Island, the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that carries 1/5 of the world's crude oil, remains contested. Iran handles approximately 90% of its oil exports through Kharg Island. Kharg Island is now the subject of active planning discussions inside the White House. Whether that becomes an order is a decision that has not yet been made public. What has been made public is the situation room meeting that discussed it, the vice president who contradicted it, the missile shortage that complicates it, and the 9 nights of bombing that preceded it. The record contains all of those things. None of them point in the same direction.